All right. All right. It is Monday now. So Monday is the end. The weekend is over. It's almost 7 in the morning now. Um I would like to apologize to Alan Brooks first and foremost because I used his name on a lot of my books. He called a bunch of people saying that he was fixing math. I was writing my memoirs in a way that was intended to teach therapists how to do therapy better. My intent was to sell these books. I was looking at the news. We had George Floyd, who clearly needed a godfather. We had the San Bernardino shooter, who clearly needed a godfather. When I was 15, I had aunts and uncles all over the place. That if I really had a problem, I had people to talk to. I think sometimes these mass shooters or people who are seriously addicted to drugs, sometimes that they needed a mentor, is my opinion. They needed someone that, and I don't mean the day they died. I mean years ago, that it would have changed their life if they had a mentor. Now, every time I watch the news and there's another one of these cases that ends up shooting at a church or a school or anywhere, a nightclub, I always wonder how would that person's future have changed if you could talk to them when they were 15 years of age and, help them join the Boy Scouts or something where there would be a mentor. Now, when George Floyd died, I had so many feelings. I wanted to write a book. I wanted to write about how does it feel to be schizoaffective and live at home. Being schizoaffective, I've been in the hospital enough times. I know what the therapy even looks like. I'm a witness to what the therapy looks like. So to see someone like that and to say, what would his life have been like if my dad was also his dad? Like, you can't help it but think that. But Alan Brooks was calling who's in it, what's it, and whoever he called to say that he was fixing math. I was writing a book of poetry about the feelings you have when you are mentally ill, watching other mental cases who did not get help and worry about why they did not get help. And because I emailed like 100 colleges, I felt like I was no different in that respect than Alan Brooks. But I was manic. And in some of those books, I made fun of him a little bit. Maybe I should not have done that. Um, so I wanted to apologize. Alan, psychosis is no joke. If you are really and truly psychotic, the only difference between you and I, Alan, is that I am on a pill called Invega, which this is not a pill you take while you're psychotic, like an aspirin for a headache. This is more like you take it every day and you'll never get psychotic in the first place. So when my Gemini started to ask me, what is the mandates going to be? I'm like, mandates? Like, what do you mean mandates? These are suggestions based on what I've seen. And it said, well, what are the mandates? And I said, well, mandates. I'm not a king. I'm not supposed to make mandates. I'm a client who has enough success to eat Pringles and drink Dr. Pepper in my own house that That doesn't sound like a huge success to people who have wealth, but for a client of mental systems, being in your own apartment where you have access to Pringles and Dr. Pepper is a lot more comfortable than having a OK Corral with the local police. I don't want to be too graphic here because I don't know if any of the people watching have children around you, but I am not interested in the OK Corral out in the middle of Boston. So I would much rather, as a mental client, if you have access to medicine, that you just take a pill every morning and for the rest of your life, you don't have to worry about the OK Corral. To me, that's a good deal. To me, that's a very good deal. Um, and of course, there are hospitals where if you're not sure whether you need the medicine, you can go to certain hospitals and they can figure out whether you need it or not. But this is what my books were about was, we don't need to keep being the OK Corral everywhere we go. Us clients, I mean. We don't have to do that. So the Gemini is asking me for mandates, I think 20 times or 25 times. And I copy pasted like 600 pages of information and put it into a Google Doc because I wanted to put the pieces I liked for my book. I call that the meat. Okay, that's the meat. The stuff you do like, the breast and the thigh of the chicken, and then all the bones and all the cartilage where it's asking me what the mandates are. My book was not about mandates. My book had nothing to do with writing about AI. So that very first book was called Headlights on the Ceiling. And it was not specifically about AI, but it was also not specifically about mandates. So all of this bones and cartilage did not end up published. And I knew who Alan Brooks's name was because on television, this was like October 27 or October 28th. There's a news thing on the television that a man called someone like 30 or 40 times asking about math. And I said, that about 30 or 40 times I've called hospitals and told them, that their therapy for my problems is not correct. But mine is from a car accident that I didn't get messed up in the head from taking cocaine. But most mental hospitals mix it together that if you have a head injury and someone else has a cocaine problem, you'll be on the same floor. Well, medical hospitals don't do that. You're not going to go to a medical hospital because you're having a seizure and they give you insulin. But in a mental hospital, sometimes the doctors have some kind of fascination with one kind of medicine and everybody gets the same medicine even if they don't have the same problem. My problem with that is that that's not effective therapy. It isn't going to work. You can't give all your patients insulin if not all of them are diabetic. So you see, I was trying to explain that in my books. But in my books, I was also trying to explain to clients out there that just because a doctor is fascinated with the wrong medicine doesn't mean all of them will do that to you. That you have the right to advocate for yourself and get a better doctor who cares about your problem. And the cases on the news were very clear. There were real people that would shoot 20 people, 10 people, sometimes 14 people. It's without a question that they were mentally ill when they did that to me, because if you wake up in the morning and you think that the right thing is the wrong thing and the wrong thing is the right thing, then you no longer know right from wrong, right? So these shooters thought that was the right thing to do. That's proof they were thinking the right thing was wrong. Yeah, never mind. The point is, the bones and the cartilage, where Gemini is asking me for mandates, kind of sits in a folder for a while. I kept taking pieces out of it to copy paste, and I made, I think, 5 or 6 books that have to do with news cases, then how they affected me and how empathy I had for these people. Now, remember, I needed a hernia surgery. I wasn't allowed to, go out and exercise or anything. So I was kind of stuck sitting still in the last 3 weeks of November. So while I'm cutting and pasting out of this and making book number 2, 3, 4, I'm actually kind of physically stuck here anyway. So I could have played a video game instead. I could have watched Gilligan's Island instead. SSDI pays me the same. I'm going to get $1,100 a month, and they don't care if I watch Gilligan's Island or look out the window for the whole day and watch the snow. They don't really care what I do. I could sit on the front porch and smoke cigarettes all day. They still give me 1,100. So it doesn't affect me what I do. So anyway, I ended up having Ellen Brooks be one of the news cases that ended up in my memory of what would have happened if Ellen Brooks had my father. I'm sorry, I keep coughing. But if Alan Brooks had a father like my father, I could go to my father when I was 14, 15 and say, look, Dad, there's unicorns in the corner of the room. They were never there when I was 11, and I know they don't exist. So why are my eyes telling me lies? And my dad was like, all right, that might be medical. You did have a head injury. You know, if they weren't there when you were 11, but they're there now, and the only thing different is you had a head injury, that might have triggered something. My mother was slower to understand it. She understands it mostly now, but back at the time, she thought that it was drugs for a little while. She thought, no, the child must be on drugs. And that is another story for a different day. But my father kind of understood that, children who take drugs, there would be money missing from the household. Or the child would not be home all day, every day. Because when I lived with my dad, I wasn't sneaking out of the house and I wasn't taking money from the house. At my mother's house, I was always leaving the house, but it wasn't because of drugs. It was because I was manic and I was going out to go walk around the block about 400 times. So, my dad's, if I was manic and I had insomnia, he didn't have rules in his house. It was like, if you really can't sleep, then you can watch TV or listen to the radio or whatever you want. At my mother's house, it was, if you can't sleep, you have to be silent because we're all sleeping. So to stay silent, I would go outside and walk, which the social services thought was not safe for a 13, 14-year-old to go running around walking in the dark at 2 in the morning. But I'm getting way off track here. When I saw the news about Alan Brooks in October, I was not aware he was going to sue the OpenAI. I didn't think he was suing anybody. When I was psychotic, I never sued anybody. I found out in treatment that, and I was only like 22, 21 when they told me this, anybody with insomnia is going to get psychotic after a certain amount of hours. It had nothing to do with AI. There was no AI when I was in my 20s. People still got psychotic, even if you were looking at television for 4 days. Whatever behavior you did because you couldn't sleep, it wasn't the behavior, it was the non sleeping. It was always a medical problem, which is why I'm on medicine in the first place. I take Invega once a day. And as you can see, taking Invega does not prevent me from remembering my memories. It does not prevent me from, carrying on with any, food or drink or anything. A lot of people are afraid to go to a doctor and ask for medicine. They think that, oh, it'll turn you into a zombie. Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Um, the medicines that existed in the 1970s, 1960s were not the same thing that they have now. And I think people should give it a chance. But in October, I did feel bad for Alan Brooks that my father was not there to help him understand. And I also, in November, when I was on painkillers, I think prescription painkillers do something to your Invega. I don't know if the Invega people know this, but I was quite manic. My surgery was December 9th, and for 2 weeks after that, you can ask my chat friends. I was just posting a link every 3 seconds, like link, 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 link. So that's mania. When you can't stop thinking the same thought over and over again, that's mania. So my thought was, hey, this song I made is really cool. People might like this. But if they saw the link at 2 o'clock, they don't need to see it 7 more times before 2:05. So I'm glad that I'm peaceful. I'm glad I'm a peaceful person. But the point is, when I found out that Alan Brooks was suing the OpenAI, I made fun of him quite a little bit in some of my books. I did. I kind of made fun of him because he's an adult. And if you stay up for 3, 4 days playing with a computer and you become psychotic because you didn't take a nap, like that's almost like what a 2-year-old would do is they're cranky because they're tired and they act like a cuckoo. And I know that sounds like a bad thing to say, but he's an adult. There's Tylenol PM. You really can't sleep? Unplug the modem, take a Tylenol PM, and when you wake up, if you still feel kind of cuckoo, then you go to the doctor. And I know I sound like a big fat know-it-all, but I do know. Of all the people alive right now, I really do know. Because my Gemini was telling me that I needed to set mandates. And I didn't set any mandates. I wrote poems about news cases where they needed a mentor. And none of my poems says anything about a mandate. So I think having an antipsychotic pill every day, even though I still got manic and got a little goofy, I still never got goofy enough to think I was the king. That I think this is really important for people to know.